Two Las Vegas women with legacies of advocacy and making lives better in their communities. Vida Lin and Jackie Brantley are our guests this week on Nevada Week in Person Extra.
Support for Nevada Week in Person is provided by Senator William H. Hernnstedt.
Welcome to Nevada Week in Person Extra. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. Native Las Vegan Jackie Brantley is a pioneer for African American women in Southern Nevada. We'll share her story ahead, but first, tragedy is what brought her to Las Vegas. However, the desire to see the Asian community triumph in Nevada is what kept her here. Vida Lin's mission is to improve the general well-being and education of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities in Nevada. The founder and president of the Asian Community Development Council joined us this week for Nevada Week in Person. Before we talk about the tragedy that I referenced, which brought you to Nevada, let's start in San Francisco, where you were born and where you worked as a waitress in your father's Chinese restaurant at just 11 years old.
Yes.
Now that would not be allowed today. I think the legal
I'm sure.
working age is 14, and even then there are restrictions. Do you ever think back to that and what impact it had on you?
You know, the impact of doing that was being able to talk to people, to meet with people, but also to talk about our food and how important that is. So I really enjoy that whole interaction of working in the restaurant, and it was hard work, but it also taught me value in long hours and how to work and be okay with that. Yeah.
You were an outgoing child.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't, but it did make me come out.
It forced you to.
It forced me to, yes.
All right, so you gave an oral history to UNLV, and in it you said that before opening multiple Chinese restaurants, your father worked as a dishwasher at Fisherman's Wharf, was fired, but then went to a Chinese community center, help center, and there people gathered enough money for him to open up a coffee shop, which then led to the restaurants. What did you think about that? And when you came to Vegas, did that kind of outreach exist?
In Las Vegas, I'm here about 30 years. This month would be 30 years in Las Vegas, and I can tell you, we had nothing like that here. But I didn't know that, being born and raised in San Francisco. I thought these community center was everywhere, like these Asian community center where the family can get help and services was a given, right? But I discovered it wasn't, so.
Do you think that experience with your father helped lead to you founding the Asian Community Development Center?
For sure. I can tell you, it's really a funny story. I tell my parents, and at that time, they're, my mom and dad, they're in the 90s, right? And I said, well, I started this nonprofit. And they look at me like, you did what? What did you do? So they told my other brother and sister, you know what? You need to help your sister. She's in a nonprofit. She doesn't have any money, so make sure you take care of her. So that's the concept of nonprofit.
Have you told them that your nonprofit generates millions of dollars?
Well, I keep explaining that to my mom, and she is 97 years old, and she goes, oh, you're an interpreter. So I decided not to try to explain myself and say, okay, that's what I would do. Yeah.
Granted, in-language services
Right.
is something huge that you provide. How big of a difference has that made in this community in your 30 years here?
Sure, I can tell you, language is our number one issue when it comes. We're not a monolith. We don't have one language that we can speak. We have multiple, over 3,500 different languages, right? So we picked the top 7 in Nevada, even though. So we have interpreters and people there to make sure that we can translate and make sure they understand the services available.
Back to what brought you to Las Vegas, and part of the reason why you were seeking the help of perhaps a community center, it was a situation with your nephew, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you believe that situation ultimately contributed to the death of his father, your brother-in-law.
Right, for sure. He was very stressed. He would call me, and I was at that time lived in San Francisco, and he'd tell me what situation he was going through. And it was heartbreaking to hear. I can hear in his voice how stressed he was, and how he was very unfamiliar with how something that was simple as my nephew.
What was happening with your nephew?
Happening with my nephew going to school, getting treated the way he was with his teacher. That they would come together and help him But instead, the family was being threatened, being farther from home from work, getting threatening phone calls, telling him to go back to his country, and pretty much dismissed because they found the Asian family or Asian community was not important at that time.
So taking a step back, your nephew was having issues with his teacher.
Right.
And your brother-in-law and sister, what did they try to do, or what was
so
their...
try to meet with the teacher, they try to meet with the principal, try to meet, with the school district. They even went to the school board meetings, to the PTA, and instead of getting help, they were told to keep quiet, and actually, they actually sued them to silence them, right? And my brother-in-law was going through a lot of issue because he's not familiar, and why is he going through this issue, right?
And he died from a heart attack?
He died from a heart attack. He had problem eating, sleeping, type of thing, and he was just so frustrated that he came to America for a better life for his family, for his, his son was born in the U.S. Why would he have to go through all that, right? So ultimately, he refused to go see a doctor and so forth. He actually died from a heart attack. It was just very tragic.
And so you moved out here in part to help with funeral arrangements and then to take care of
that
this legal issue
that my 8-year-old nephew is going through, right? So, and the family is going through that. Yes, it was quite horrible not to know that there was nowhere in Las Vegas that didn't get support and help for that.
Yeah.
It was a simple thing that they could have handled. Yeah.
How's your nephew doing now?
He's actually doing well. He's actually a graphic designer. When he was younger, trying to communicate, he used to draw stick figures to tell me what was going on or tell us what's going on. And now he's a graphic designer, so it's great to see that. And then my niece is now a doctor. She wanted to make sure that she can help other Asian families or people who has heart condition or health issue, that she would be able to do that. So we, as a family, we all came together and kind of help and raise the kids as much as we could with my kids.
When your family was being sued, it was for defamation.
Right.
And that is when you learned the importance of homeowners insurance, which I learned something here. How does that play into a legal defense?
So in your homeowner insurance, you have what you call personal liability. That personal liability that you pay, that's $100,000, helps you with legal fees, but it doesn't help you sue, but it helps protect you. So that's why I want to educate our community. If they didn't have that, they would have lost everything. They would be, they would lose their home, they would lose everything else. So I'm glad that we had something that we fell into, but I also wanted to educate our community about how important that is.
And that still exists today for our viewers out there.
Yes, for your homeowner insurance. Like, insurance company is not going to love me right now. I just explained the coverage that you have. Right?
All right, so you become an insurance broker, then you own your own insurance agency. You're helping the Asian community in their businesses. You go on to become the president of the Las Vegas Asian Chamber of Commerce. And in that oral history I mentioned, you talked about, in that role, you had to talk to the casinos and educate them about the significance of the Asian community in Las Vegas. What were you telling them?
I just met with one of the largest casinos. I said, do you know 40% gaming comes from our community? Why are you not giving back to our community? And I think it was something that they kind of they didn't know. So that whole educational piece about our community is very important. And for my last 30 years, I think still doing that, educating, connecting, empowering our community is what I base everything on.
How well understood do you think it is right now, the significance of the Asian community in Las Vegas?
I can tell you, you've been in Las Vegas at least 10 years, you have seen the growth of our community. Where right now, according to the 2020 census, we're over 400,000 Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander in Nevada. So we've grown. And you looked at Spring Mountain and seen that corridor, and now we have the new Asia Town. You have seen the growth. I have seen the growth in the last 30 years I've been here, for sure. Yeah.
What do you think about it when you reflect on it?
I think it's great, because I think what brings people together is understanding our Asian community, our history that we have given to the United States. And in Nevada, especially in Nevada, with the railroads and the building of the railroads. So I think educating our community about how much the Asian has given to our country or to our state is really important.
Back to the time as president of the Las Vegas Asian Chamber, this is during the recession.
Right, during the housing crisis.
How did that impact your community?
An impact is when it comes to that issue, a lot of the Asians are homeowners, and many of them lost their home because they didn't understand. They were trying to refinance their home, but instead of getting refinancing, they were actually getting money taken from them, and people were getting pushed out of their homes in the middle of the night trying to say, okay, the bank owns it now, out in the street you go, right? So educating our community about that was really difficult, and how do we help that? And when we talk about homelessness in the Asian community, sometimes we're talking about they will live in their relative's home or live in a friend's home and sleep on the floor until you can get back on their feet. So it's a little different how we do that, right? So that was an eye-opener for me to say, I would never expect that we would ever lose your home, right? You couldn't have a roof to go to, right? So it really taught me it's great that we can help the business owners, small business owners, but we have to help their home life too, right?
So then that opened your eyes, I think I have read, to the need to help individuals. And so you start your nonprofit. It gets its status in 2015. Voter registration becomes a big priority for you.
Yes.
What efforts did you take to you had grant money tied to, I have to get a certain number of people registered to vote.
Right.
What did you do?
Well, we did a lot of really crazy things, but one of the things I did was, people love, is I went to a hip hop club to register our community to vote, right?
I was hoping you would tell this story.
And I can tell you, it was really funny to see me going to a hip hop club, trying to register people to vote. But we had friends and people that was there that would say, we will help you with that, because we know the importance of getting our community to vote. Because if we don't get our community to register to vote and get them out to the poll, we would not have a voice. And that was important to make sure our community has a voice.
The Asian Community Development Council also played a huge role during COVID. Of everything that your nonprofit did during that time, what are you most proud of?
Well, there's two things I'm really proud of. One is that we started food distribution that's culturally sensitive to our community. Because when we first started the food distribution for our community, they were giving us things like cheese and rice and so forth. I mean, cheese and milk and so forth, which most Asians are not good with dairy. So we started a big distribution that would house rice and food, fish and vegetables that our community is used to, right? So that was one thing that we've done, that we have given out over 5 million pounds of food so far, helping over 22,000 individuals in getting them food because many of them work in casinos or places, and they were out of a job and didn't know how to feed the family. And the second thing that we're very proud of doing is getting the vaccine to our community, having these pop up in the heart of Asia Town to make sure our community is vaccinated and understand the importance of that.
And be given that vaccination by someone who is speaking their language.
Exactly, exactly.
Last thing, January 18th, 2023 was officially recognized as Vida Lin Day in Las Vegas.
I still find that kind of funny.
Is it?
Yes.
What does it mean to you?
It means it's kind of surreal. Why would they recognize me and have a day, right? And I think the funny part was when they told me, I was kind of shocked, of course. And then one of my staff asked me, "Do we get 2 days off?" I said, "It's Vida Lin Day night." But I thought that was funny, but I still find that to be amusing.
Vida Lin, what a tremendous legacy you have, and much more to come, I imagine. Thank you for joining Nevada Week in Person.
Thank you for having me.
Jackie Brantley started her career as a hotel maid and worked her way up, becoming the first Black woman to oversee publicity and advertising for a Las Vegas Strip casino. We caught up with her after she was inducted into the historic Westside's Legacy Park last year. So you grew up in Las Vegas on the historic West Side, and at that time it was segregated. And I'm wondering, what about that time period and that era contributed to you becoming the trailblazer that you have become?
Well, you know, I didn't see segregation as a little child growing up because our community was almost self-contained. We had many cultures in and out of the community, and we welcomed all cultures in the community. We were fortunate to have many entertainers that frequented Jackson Street. We had many professional people that entertained and also worked in the community. So segregation could be more of a, I won't call it a negative word, because when you're in an area, especially in an African American neighborhood like that, it's like a melting pot, but everybody in that community had something positive to do. And we didn't look at segregation as a bad word. Actually, we had our own grocery stores, our own bowling alley, we had our own churches, schools. And it was flourishing. It was a flourishing Black community. And as things changed and the community started to grow and people started to move out, then it became more of a thought process. What is segregation? What is integration? But we really lost a lot when a lot of the people started to move out of that closely knit community. I don't see it as anything negative, but it did prepare me for what was to come. It did prepare me for what was to come.
How so?
Well, you know, there were many protests in the community. There was protests around the country, and because my folks were avid readers, and you know, we did have news reports from what was going on around the country, we were aware of what was going on. We had the voter rights, we had civil rights, we had a lot of things that happened after World War II. Segregation, people couldn't vote. In fact, we didn't even get the vote to 1964. But when we were able to vote, we were in line, and the people in that community, they were representing. And I was so proud to see that happen, especially when people like Martin Luther King would come to our community. Our own minister.
Do you remember that?
Oh yes, I remember one of our minister, Reverend Marion Bennett, and one of our distant extended relatives, Virgie Fitzgerald, who is the wife of H.P. Fitzgerald, also named in the Legacy Park. They went out on the tarmac to meet him. And it was in the Review Journal, and we were all so excited. And we were also aware that Las Vegas finally arrived, because now you're getting all of these national celebrities to come here and then to teach us how to do it, and to work with us and to groom us, and Las Vegas became a hot spot for that.
You had told me off camera that you think people in that area right now need a pick-me-up.
I do.
To see someone like you.
Oh,
Why?
Well, you know what? My first job as a 5-year-old was taking out the trash. And as I, you know, sprouted or hit the alley to drop off the trash cans, I'd look up at the sky and I see one star. And I would say, you know, I'm gonna wish for better things and wish for better times for the community. And believe me, when you dream, dreams are therefore plans. So you just keep that hopefulness, you keep that uplifting spirit, and you just keep going. You don't ever stop, because there's always 2 positives to 1 negative. And it's how you look at it. So that's basically, and plus, you know, I had some help. My grandparents were wonderful. My uncle, Herman Moody, was wonderful. I had some great role models in the community.
Your grandfather was a fixture in the community.
My grandfather, we had a patriarchal society, and not just in Black communities, this was all communities. And my grandfather was the grand patriarch, and everybody in the community respected him, and of course we did. And you know, I was an observer of the elders. I was an observer.
What kind of impact do you think did he have on you?
I think thinking about how he traveled from Mississippi, from McLean, Mississippi, 100 miles to the west, 100 miles to the west, until they arrived in Arizona. And they worked there in the lumber market for a while, and then they came to Las Vegas. They were on their way to Oregon because there was work there. And that was during the Great Migration. Now this little man, he probably was only about 5'5", 6", with 2 kids, right? My mom, Susie Moody Parker, my uncle, Herman Moody. And they just got in the car and they went from McNairy, Arizona, because that was the community that they were in. Then they came to Las Vegas. And the first day they were here, the car broke down. So he wanted to go out and experiment, see what was the city like. So he went to some of the casinos. They were downtown Las Vegas. And by the way, there were Black people downtown at that time. We're talking about 1939.
prior
Okay.
to the segregation that happened.
Exactly. And then there was a substantial black community downtown. They owned their own property, their own businesses. As a matter of fact, they bundled up with other blacks that were moving through the Great Migration. That's what they did, almost like the Underground Railroad, but it was not.
For
It
economic
was-
opportunity.
Yeah, the opportunity. And that night, I'm not sure exactly, it could have been the Las Vegas Club, it could have been the Prelude to Binion's, but he worked. And my mother and my uncle, they stayed in the car. They waited in the car for him. And he worked for about 5 or 6, 7 hours, and he came back. His pockets were heavy with, they call them bow dollars. They were silver dollars, and his pockets were dragging around. I said, where do you get all that money? Well, I worked. He said, I don't think we're going to be leaving right away. So that's how it began for my family. Yes.
Let's talk about you. And you went from being a maid in high school to the director of public relations
Yes.
at a Las Vegas Strip casino, one of
Yes.
the earliest African-American professionals on the Las Vegas Strip. How did you do it?
I worked as a maid during the summer months. I went to Rancho High School. That's where I graduated in 1966. And it was a fun school to go to. You know, and I was prepared. I was prepared to work, and took a lot of honors classes in school. I was a good student. My mother was a school teacher. But anyway, getting back to working as a maid, I could earn 2 or 3 times the money that I earned working in the school cafeteria or working at the Guild Theater. I remember working there for the Cats, you know, in high school. And I was like, God, look at all, I felt like my grandfather, look at all this money. You know, and I earned so much money. I paid for my wedding, I paid for my apartment, I paid for all my furniture. I didn't even need any money from my mother. I was like, oh my God, this money. But then I thought, you know something, I'm learning how to clean my house too. And I'm also learning how to get through 13 or 14 rooms, and that was some hard work. But I looked around and I saw other professional people doing it in the summer. Teachers, because they didn't earn enough money as school teachers during the year. That was a low-paying job. And I learned from them, and I also learned that that is something I don't want to do for a living. I need to get an education, I need to take myself to the next level, but this is honorable work. And so I use that as a stepping stone, and I always remember, and I never look down my nose on people who start out as maids or whatever, but getting to the Desert Inn was only a couple of blocks away from the Westward Ho. That's where I began. So I was kind of used to getting out on the Strip, catching the bus or whatever to do to get to work. And I said, oh my God, these hotels would have a lot of rooms too, but I don't want to do that kind of work when I get there.
No, you become director of public
Correct.
relations at the
Yes.
Desert Inn. You
That's
started
right.
there as a secretary, worked your
Yes,
way up,
yes. Mm-hmm.
where you're working around a lot of white male executives, and you're a young black woman.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, you know what? I look at men as men, you know, white, black, green, blue, whatever. Man is a man. And I tell you, in the patriarchal society at that time, you know, women, you couldn't have, you know, own your own property for a while. You couldn't do this for a while. It didn't matter if you were white or black. But at the same time, let's get back to it. In our neighborhood, it was a melting pot. You know, we had white accountants, okay? My mom worked as a bookkeeper. The accountant would come to the house. We had gaming executives. There were hotels in the historic Westside. Some of them were run by people that were from, like, maybe the Asian culture, right? Then there were individuals that were from all cultures. I was accustomed to that. But working in that area, it didn't bother me, because a man is a man. And if he got out of line, I had to put him in check, right? And a couple did get out of line, and I had to put a couple of them in check. I got a lot of respect for that, though.
Did you ever have to put any celebrities in check? Because you
Yes.
worked with a lot of them at
I
the
did.
Desert Inn. Like who?
Well, you know, we don't want to leave Jethro. Oh, it was it Beverly Hillbillies? Yeah, he got out of line.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah.
How so?
I'm not going to tell you, but I had to put him in check.
We're protecting Jethro's
Right, yeah,
reputation
right,
here.
yeah. Is he living or dead? I don't know, but I don't know if he'll remember that. But anyway, there were times when I was in a tough situation, but I found that if you respect yourself, then the respect will come from others, whether they're black, green, blue, or whatever.
Your career also included some modeling.
Yes.
An appearance in Ebony magazine, but that
Right.
was not related to modeling. What was that?
No, it wasn't. That appearance in Ebony was announcing that I was the Director of Advertising and Public Relations, there was an article written by Elliot Crane. He was with the Las Vegas Today, and he found it fascinating that I was a maid and that I was working at the Desert Inn. He said, "Can I do a story?" I said, "Yeah, do a story." So he sent the story from the Las Vegas Today to Ebony Magazine. Then they contacted me and said, hey, you know, is this true? Yes. And then I was outside the Desert Inn in front of the pylon, which Wayne Newton was appearing. And one of my jobs was to help them create a feather, because that talked about his heritage.
Okay.
And so Wayne Newton's name was on the billboard, and I was in front. And that was my job, to make sure that pylon was correct, and that the entertainment got out, and that the advertising got paid for. You know, so, you know, it was a thrilling job. It was
Talking about another job, we
yeah.
only have 1 minute left.
Sure.
You worked under former Governor Kenny
Yes.
Gwynn, communications director, as well as
Yes.
community relations.
Constituent Services Director.
Big job.
Yes.
What kind of impact did he have on you and you on him?
Well, I worked with the Clark County School District from 18 until after I got married, had my children. I worked for the Clark County School District for 8 years, and there I was around a lot of educators. And Kenny Gwynn was he was the manager in school facilities. He was a consultant. Then he became the superintendent.
So you knew him then?
Yes, so we worked closely together, and one thing we had in common,
What?
we both drove Volkswagens. We were frugal. He was a numbers cruncher. I was a numbers cruncher. And so he remembered me working with him at the school district. He followed my career, and then he moved my desk from DMV into the governor's office. There you go.
Jackie Brantley, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining Nevada Week in person.
for having me.
And for more interviews like this, go to vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week.